47 seconds. That's how long it took for Alpha Garrett Kane to condemn Astrid Lowell to death. Minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. 60-mile-per-hour winds screaming through the Colorado Rockies like 1,000 banshees. The Blood Moon blizzard, the deadliest storm in recorded pack history. Weather stations across 3 states had broadcast emergency warnings for 72 hours straight. No travel, no exceptions. Survival time for an exposed wolf in these conditions, less than 2 hours before hypothermia shut down vital organs. Less than 3 before the cold stopped your heart completely. But Alpha Garrett Kane didn't care about statistics. He didn't care about survival rates or emergency warnings or the fact that even the strongest alpha wouldn't last until dawn in that frozen hell. He cared about one thing: getting rid of the Omega who knew too much. Astrid Lowell stood in the great hall of Shadow Pine Pack, her threadbare medical scrubs still splattered with blood from the afternoon's emergency surgery. 22 years old, 5'3", 105 pounds soaking wet. Dark brown hair that always seemed to escape whatever braid she tried to twist it into. Sea green eyes that were too observant, too intelligent for someone who was supposed to be invisible. She was an Omega, the lowest rank in the pack hierarchy. The servants, the caregivers, the healers who worked in the shadows while the alphas and betas basked in glory. But Astrid wasn't just any Omega. She knew 314 medicinal herbs by heart, could identify a plant by touch in complete darkness, could diagnose a poison by smell alone. Her mother Sarah Grace had been chief healer of Shadow Pine Pack before her mysterious death 10 years ago, before Garrett Kane had her killed. Astrid had no proof, not yet, but she'd spent a decade watching, waiting, learning everything her mother never got the chance to teach her. And tonight, while treating a border patrol warrior for a suspicious infection, she'd seen something in his wound that made her blood run cold. Traces of FA poison. FA poison didn't exist naturally in the Colorado Rockies. It came from the Fey realms, cost a fortune on the black market, and had only 3 documented suppliers in all of North America. It was invisible, odorless, and when applied correctly could mimic natural illness so perfectly that even experienced healers would miss it. But Astrid's mother had taught her the one test that never failed. A drop of silverwood sap on the affected tissue. If it turned black, you had for contamination. The tissue had turned black. Someone in Shadow Pine Pack had access to FA poison. Someone with enough money and connections to acquire it. Someone with enough authority that no one would question suspicious deaths. Someone like Alpha Garrett Kane. Astrid had been so focused on documenting her findings, on carefully preserving a tissue sample in a sterile vial, that she'd missed the dinner bells, had missed the formal announcement that tonight was the choosing ceremony. The night when Garrett would select his new Luna. His previous mate had died of a fever 18 months ago. The pack had been rudderless, ever since unstable without the balance that only a Luna could provide. Everyone knew Garrett would choose Scarlet Vaughn, the beta's daughter. Beautiful, cruel Scarlet with her auburn hair and sharp tongue. Scarlet, who had made Astrid's life miserable since childhood, who took every opportunity to remind the Omega of her place. Astrid didn't care who Garrett chose. She'd been planning to work through the ceremony anyway, cataloging the medical supplies that had mysteriously started depleting faster than usage records showed. Another red flag, another piece of a puzzle she didn't fully understand yet. But then Garrett's head Omega, a nervous woman named Pearl, had found her in the medical bay. He wants you in the Great Hall, now. Don't change, don't clean up, just go. Astrid's stomach had dropped. In 22 years, Garrett had never specifically summoned her anywhere. Omegas were supposed to be interchangeable, invisible, forgettable. Being noticed by Garrett Kane was never a good thing. Now she stood in the Great Hall and 200 pairs of eyes watched her cross the polished wooden floor. The space was magnificent, 3 stories tall, with massive timber beams and a chandelier made from elk antlers. Tapestries showing the pack's history hung from the walls. The ceremonial fire pit in the center blazed, casting dancing shadows across the gathered crowd. Everyone was dressed in formal attire, suits and gowns, leather and silk, the pack's elite displaying their status through expensive fabrics and tailored fits. Astrid wore medical scrubs with someone else's blood on them. Her boots squeaked on the floor, still damp from where she'd knelt in melted snow to help carry in the injured warrior. Her hair was a disaster, half fallen from its braid. She probably smelled like antiseptic and sweat. She'd never felt smaller in her life. Garrett stood on the raised platform at the far end of the hall, Scarlett beside him in a crimson gown that probably cost more than Astrid earned in a year. The Alpha was an imposing figure, 6'4", 240 pounds of muscle and menace. His hair had gone prematurely silver, giving him a distinguished look that photographs loved. His eyes were pale grey like winter ice and just as warm. He smiled as Astrid approached. It was not a kind smile. "Our dedicated healer," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. Working so hard, she forgot to attend her Alpha's choosing ceremony. "Tell me Astrid is my pack's celebration less important than whatever you were doing in that medical bay?" It was a trap. Answer wrong and he'd call her insubordinate. Answer right and she'd insult the warrior she'd been treating. "I apologize, Alpha," Astrid said quietly, keeping her eyes down in the submissive posture expected of Omegas. Border Patrol brought in a warrior with a severe infection. He needed immediate treatment. "And is this warrior still alive?" "Yes, Alpha. Stable and resting." "Then you did your job. How fortunate for him that we have such a competent Omega." Garrett's tone made the compliment sound like an insult. "But you see, Astrid, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Something that's troubled me for quite some time." The hall had gone completely silent. Even the fire seemed to crackle more quietly. "Your father," Garrett continued, pacing the platform like a predator circling prey, "was an Omega. Did you know he abandoned this pack 15 years ago? Just disappeared one night, left his pregnant mate behind, left his responsibilities, left his shame." Astrid's fingers curled into tight fists at her sides, nails biting crescents into her palms. She'd heard this story 1,000 times, always delivered like a slur. Her father's abandonment was her original sin, the stain she could never wash away. "I didn't know him, Alpha. I was 7 when he left." "No, you were 6. Garrett stopped pacing, pinning her with those cold eyes. "I remember because your mother came to me, begging for help finding him, crying about how he'd never just leave, how something must have happened to him." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I told her the truth, that her mate was a coward, that he'd rather run than face the responsibility of raising a child, that some wolves are born without honor." Astrid's mother had never spoken about that conversation, had never told Astrid what Garrett said. But Astrid had watched her mother's light dim over the following years, had seen the way she stopped smiling, stopped hoping, had seen the way she started investigating things she shouldn't have investigated. "You carry his shame, Astrid. You carry his coward's blood." Garrett's voice dropped to become almost gentle. "And tonight, on this sacred night when I choose my Luna, I think it's time we address that." Every instinct screamed at Astrid to run, but there were nowhere to go. The pack surrounded her on all sides, a living wall of judgment. "Kneel," Garrett commanded. It wasn't a request, it was an Alpha order laced with enough power that Astrid's wolf, small and timid, and broken by years of suppression, immediately tried to comply. Her knees bent without her permission. Her body sank toward the floor. She fought it, fought the compulsion with everything she had. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "We are healers, Astrid. We kneel for no one, not even Alphas." But Astrid was an Omega, the weakest designation, and Garrett was an Alpha in his prime, fueled by rage and righteousness. Her knees hit the floor with a crack that echoed through the silent hall. "That's better," Garrett purred. "Now, I want you to count to 100, out loud. Let this pack hear you acknowledge your place. Let them hear you apologize for the shame your father brought to Shadow Pine." Astrid's throat felt like it was closing. 200 people watched her, waited. Some looked uncomfortable, Most looked indifferent. A few scarlet among them looked delighted. One Astrid whispered. Louder, Garrett snapped. 1. Her voice cracked. 2, 3, 4. It was the longest count of her life. With each number her humiliation grew. With each number she felt smaller, more worthless, more invisible. At 50 her voice started to break. At 75, tears slipped down her cheeks despite her desperate attempts to hold them back. At 90, she could barely force the words past the grief choking her throat. 100, she finally managed. The hall remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Scarlett's clear voice rang out. She stinks of weakness, of failure. I can smell it from here, Garrett. Why do we tolerate her presence? Garrett tilted his head considering. You know what, my Luna? You're absolutely right. He'd called Scarlett his Luna. The ceremony was over. She'd been chosen. But Garrett wasn't done with Astrid. I hereby exile Astrid Lowell from Shadow Pine Pack, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Exile was rare, reserved for the worst crimes. Treason, murder, unforgivable violations of pack law. An elderly voice cried out from the back. Elder Margot, the oldest Omega in the pack, 68 years old, and still sharp as a blade. Alpha, the blood moon. Blizzard hits in less than an hour. The elders call it. The hunter's death. No wolf survives a night exposed in those conditions. Garrett shrugged. Then Astrid had better start running. Maybe the moon goddess will show her more mercy than I have. He descended from the platform, grabbed Astrid's arm with bruising force and hauled her to her feet. She stumbled, her legs numb from kneeling, her mind reeling from shock. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Garrett dragged her through the crowd. People parted like water, unwilling to touch her now that she was exiled, unwilling to show even a moment of compassion that might associate them with her shame. The massive oak doors loomed ahead. Beyond them, the wind howled. Through the windows, Astrid could see the snow already falling in thick sheets, could see the trees bending under the force of the gale. Any last words? Garrett asked pleasantly. Astrid looked up at him, really looked at him, saw the coldness in his eyes, the satisfaction. This wasn't about her father's abandonment. This wasn't about pack honor or Omega shame. This was murder. He knew. Somehow he knew she'd found the FA poison, knew she was getting too close to something he wanted hidden. I hope, Astrid said quietly, her voice steady despite her terror, that whatever you're hiding comes to light. I hope everyone sees what you really are. Garrett's smile vanished. For just a moment, something like respect flickered in his eyes. Then, he shoved her. Astrid flew through the doorway and down the steps, landing hard in snow that had already accumulated 6 inches deep. The cold was immediate and vicious, a physical shock that stole her breath. The wind hit her like a fist, howling in her ears, tearing at her thin scrubs. Behind her, the oak doors slammed shut. The heavy iron bar slid into place with a finality that echoed in her bones. She was alone, exiled, in the deadliest blizzard in Colorado history. The pack house clock struck 9 as she pushed herself to her feet. 9 p.m. 14 minutes since Garrett had called her forward. 14 minutes to destroy a life. Astrid forced her medical training to the forefront. Assess the situation. Identify threats. Prioritize survival. Current temperature approximately -10 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill. Her scrubs were not remotely adequate. Already, she could feel the cold seeping through the thin cotton ice crystals, forming in her hair. Estimated survival time without shelter 2 hours, maybe less. Options. Return to the pack house. She immediately dismissed that. Garrett would have guards at the door with orders to use lethal force. Run for the highway. Also dismissed. The highway was 12 miles east through open territory. She'd never make it. That left only one choice. The Blackwood forests. 2 miles north, Ancient pine forest, so dense, the canopy sometimes blocked out the sun. The trees would provide some protection from the wind. And somewhere in those woods, according to old pack maps Astrid had studied, while cataloging medical supplies, was a cave system. Emergency shelters for hunters caught in sudden storms. 2 miles. She had to cover 2 miles in sub-zero temperature in a blizzard, in medical scrubs and worn boots. She took her first step and immediately sank to mid-calf in snow. The single word echoed in her mind: primal and urgent survive. Astrid ran. The world dissolved into chaos within minutes. White everywhere above and below and in every direction. The snow came horizontally driven by winds so strong, she had to lean into them just to stay upright. It felt like running through a wall, like the air itself had turned solid and hostile. Her boots, already old and cracked, soaked through in seconds. Her feet became numb blocks of ice. Each step was agony, but stopping meant death, so she pushed forward. She couldn't see the pack house anymore. Couldn't see anything except the next few feet of white hell. She tried to track her direction by the wind, keeping it at her left shoulder. North. She needed north. But the wind shifted constantly, gusting from different angles, disorienting her. Time lost meaning. Seconds felt like hours. Or maybe hours felt like seconds. All Astrid knew was the cold, the wind, the desperate need to keep moving. Her body tried to shift, tried to call on her wolf form for warmth and strength. But Astrid had always been weak at shifting her Omega wolf, too small and timid to offer much protection. The best she could manage was a partial change claws extending from her fingertips, fangs pushing through her gums, her ears elongating and sharpening. It wasn't enough. She stumbled over a buried log and went down hard, face first, into a snowdrift. The powder was soft, almost inviting. For a moment, lying there felt good. Warm even. The wind was muffled, distant. Her medical training screamed warnings. Stage 2 hypothermia. The dangerous warmth that preceded death. Her core temperature dropping her body, shutting down non-essential functions, her mind beginning to accept the cold as comfort. Get up or you die here. You don't get to quit. Astrid forced herself to her hands and knees, then to her feet. Her mother hadn't raised a quitter. Sarah Grace had spent her last years fighting Garrett's corruption, had died rather than back down. Astrid would honor that, would survive this, would make Garrett pay. She took another step, another. Then she heard something that made her blood run even colder than the blizzard. A howl, long and low and hungry. Not the howl of pack wolves. Pack wolves had structure, harmony, purpose. This was feral, wild. The sound of predators who lived outside civilization's rules. Wraith claws. They were the nightmare stories pack elders told to keep pups in line. Half-fae, half-wolf hybrids born from ancient bloodlines that shouldn't have mixed. They were bigger than normal wolves, faster and completely insane. The fae blood in their veins gave them intelligence and the ability to speak, but it also drove them mad with hunger and rage. They lived in the deep wilderness of the Rockies, as far from civilization as possible. They hunted in packs, and they were absolutely merciless. Another howl closer this time, then another from a different direction. They were surrounding her. Astrid's hand went to her belt, to the small utility knife she always carried in her medical kit. 4 inches of silver-plated steel. It was meant for cutting medical tape and opening supply packages. Against wraith claws, it would be about as effective as a toothpick. 3 massive shapes emerged from the blizzard ahead of her. Wolves, but wrong. Too large, 200 pounds at least. Their fur was mangy and matted patches of skin showing through. Their eyes glowed with a sickly pale green light that cut through the snow like searchlights. The lead wolf had a massive scar running down its face, and its left ear was missing entirely. Just a ragged stump. Well, the wolf said, its voice a grinding rasp that hurt to hear. Wraith claws could speak because of their fae blood, but their vocal cords weren't designed for it. What do we have here? A little Omega, all alone in the big bad storm. Astrid backed up her knife, held in a white-knuckle grip. Behind her, she could hear more wolves approaching. She was surrounded. I have nothing, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm exiled. I'm worthless. Please just let me go. The lead wolf Scar, she mentally named him, laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Oh, little Omega, you're not worthless, not to us. Cain paid us 10,000 silver to make sure you don't see morning. Astrid's mind reeled. Garrett hadn't just exiled her. He'd hired assassins, had paid a fortune to guarantee her death. Why? She whispered. Don't know, don't care. Scar took a step closer, his breath visible in the frozen air. He said, make it look like the blizzard got you. So we'll be quick. Well, relatively quick. Can't waste good meat, you understand. The other wolves laughed, a horrible cacophony that sent ice through Astrid's veins. Astrid's back hit something solid. Rock. She'd backed against the cliff face without realizing it. She glanced left and right, desperately searching for escape. There, to her right, partially hidden by a curtain of frozen ivy and icicles, a shadow. A gap in the rock. A cave. Last words, Omega, Scar asked, almost politely. Astrid looked at him, at his glowing green eyes, at the wolves flanking him. She thought about her mother, about the secrets Sarah Grace had died protecting, about the FA poison in that warrior's wound, about all the questions that would never be answered if she died here. Yes, she said, I hope you choke on me. Then she dove, not away from the wolves, toward them, or rather past them in a direction they weren't expecting. Her small size was an advantage for once. She rolled between Scar's legs, came up running, and sprinted for the cave entrance. Scar roared. Jaws snapped inches from her ankle. Claws raked her back, shredding through her scrubs, scoring lines of fire across her skin. But she was fast. Desperation made her faster. She hit the frozen ivy curtain at full speed, crashed through it, and plunged into darkness. The transition from howling wind to dead silence was shocking. Astrid skidded on the icy stone floor, lost her footing, and went sliding down a sloped passage. She tumbled, rolled, crashed into a wall and lay there gasping. Behind her, she heard the wraith claws at the cave entrance, heard their snarls and pacing, but they didn't enter. Come on then, Scar's voice echoed. She's right there. Easy prey. I'm not going in there. Another voice, younger, uncertain. Why not? You don't feel it. There's something in there. Something old. Something powerful. A long pause. Then Scar growled. Fine. Blizzard will finish her if whatever's in there doesn't. Cain gets his money either way. The sounds of their retreat faded. The wind howled on. But inside the cave, there was only silence. Astrid checked her watch through cracked crystal. 9:47 p.m. 47 minutes since exile. She'd survived 47 minutes. Now she just had to survive until morning. She lay on the stone floor, her entire body, one massive shiver. The scratches on her back burned. Her fingers had moved past pain into dangerous numbness. She knew she should get up, should assess the cave, should look for materials to start a fire. But for just a moment, she let herself lie there, let herself feel the impossible relief of being alive. Then she smelled it. Blood, old blood, and new. The metallic tang of it thick in the still air. And underneath that something else. Something that made her wolf small and broken as it was suddenly raise its head in recognition. Alpha. Powerful alpha. Multiple alphas. Astrid forced herself to sit up. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled with the flint and steel from her medical kit. Not from fear now, but from cold and adrenaline crash. She struck a spark on the third try. The tiny flame caught on a piece of dried tinder, grew, and she held it up. The light revealed a cathedral. The cave was massive easily, 100 feet across and 40 feet high. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like frozen teeth. Ancient pack symbols had been carved into the walls, emergency shelter markings from generations past. And on the floor, scattered across the stone like broken warriors, lay 12 wolves. Massive wolves. Dire wolves. The old bloodlines that produced alphas so powerful, they could command entire territories with a glance. Their fur black-grey deep auburn was thick and healthy despite the matted blood. They wore the remnants of tactical gear, black fabric torn and shredded. None of them were moving. Astrid's tiny flame illuminated a scene of carnage. Black ichor pooled beneath the bodies. For poison, she recognized it instantly from her research. These wolves had been shot with poisoned arrows, multiple wounds each. This wasn't a battle they'd lost. This was an assassination. Her healer's instinct warred with her survival instinct. She should run, should get as far from this death as possible. Whatever had happened here, it was none of her business. She'd done enough surviving for one night. But her mother's voice spoke in her memory. We are healers, Astrid. We don't run from death. We fight it. Astrid crawled toward the nearest body. A male human formed, with hair as black as a raven's wing. Young, maybe late 20s. Powerfully built even in death. His face was aristocratic, with high cheekbones and a proud nose. Blood had dried in the corner of his mouth. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat, expecting nothing. A pulse. Weak, thready, barely there. But a pulse. Oh goddess, Astrid breathed. She moved to the next wolf. Pulse. The next. Pulse. The next. No pulse. He was gone, too much blood loss. Probably dead for hours. But the next. Pulse. 11 out of 12 were still alive. Barely. She examined the black ichor more closely. Touched it carefully with her smallest finger, brought it near her nose. For poison, exactly like what she'd found in the border warrior's wound. But this was concentrated, undiluted, probably coated on arrow tips for maximum effect. Whoever shot these wolves had used enough poison to kill a herd of elephants. The fact that any of them were still breathing was a testament to the sheer will that only the strongest alphas possessed. Astrid did the mental math. Fa poison killed through gradual organ failure, usually within 12 hours of exposure. These wounds looked 6 to 8 hours old, based on blood coagulation and tissue discoloration, which meant she had maybe 4 hours before the poison did irreversible damage to major organs. 4 hours to save 11 dying alphas, with nothing but the supplies in her medical kit and whatever she could scavenge from this cave. It was impossible. Medically, mathematically, physically impossible. But Astrid had spent her entire life being told things were impossible. Being told she was too weak, too small, too omega to matter. And she'd spent the last hour surviving what should have killed her. She was done accepting impossible. Okay, she said to the unconscious wolves, her voice steady now. Let's do this. First fire. Real fire, not her tiny tinder flame. She spotted dried wood in the corner of the cave, old supply cache, from hunters decades old, but still dry. Within minutes, she had a proper blaze going and blessed warmth began to seep into her frozen body. Second, assess supplies. From her medical kit, silverwood sap, basic antiseptic surgical thread, needles, scalpel, bandages. From the cave supplies, more wood, a rusty pot, a wool blanket eaten by moths, but still functional. Third, the antidote. Moonvine was the only cure for food poison, and it only grew at high elevation in specific conditions. Silver green leaves with thorns that burned like fire if you touched them wrong. Astrid had seen it once in her mother's private journal, along with the exact formula for preparing the antidote. She grabbed a burning branch and went back to the cave entrance, braving the blizzard one more time. The wraith claws were gone, their tracks already covered by fresh snow. Outside, the frozen ivy curtain swayed in the wind, and there, hidden among the ivy, like a gift from the moon goddess, herself grew a moonvine plant. It shouldn't be here. Moonvine grew above 10,000 feet, not at this elevation. But the magic of the cave, the ancient power that had frightened even wraith claws, must have created conditions for it to thrive. The moon goddess provides for those who fight for life. Her mother had told her that. She'd never believed it until now. Astrid cut the vine carefully, her frozen fingers clumsy but determined, avoiding the thorns that could cause chemical burns. She retreated back into the warmth of the cave. Then she went to work. The next 90 minutes were a blur of desperate focused medicine. She ground the moonvine into paste, using the mortar and pestle from her kit, mixed it with pine resin and melted snow to create the proper ratio. 3 parts moonvine, 1 part resin, 2 parts liquid. Her mother's formula memorized from that old journal years ago. She started with the raven-haired male because he was the most critical chest wound, shallow breathing pulse barely palpable. She packed the green-white paste into his wound, working it deep into the tissue where it could enter his bloodstream and neutralize the poison. The male's entire body convulsed. His back arched off the stone floor, every muscle locked rigid. A sound tore from his throat, not quite human, not quite wolf. Pure agony. "I know," Astrid whispered, holding him down with her body weight. "I know it hurts. The antidote has to burn out the poison. Please fight, please." His eyes snapped open, molten gold, the eyes of an alpha in the grip of fever and fury. They locked on her face with such intensity, she thought he might tear her throat out. Then recognition flickered, not of her specifically, but of what she was doing. Understanding that she was trying to help, he passed out again, his body going limp. But the black poison around his wound was receding, slowly, centimeter by centimeter, but receding. It was working. Astrid moved to the next wolf, a massive male with a red beard and shoulders like a mountain wound on his ribs. Then the next, a younger male with sandy blonde hair and a throat wound that should have been fatal. Then the next and the next and the next. With each application, her technique improved. With each wolf that responded to treatment, her confidence grew stronger. By the time she reached the 11th wolf, her moonvine paste was almost gone. She scraped out every last bit, packed it into his wounds with gentle precision, and prayed it would be enough. Then she sat back against the cave wall, wrapped in the moth-eaten blanket, and waited. She was exhausted, beyond exhausted. Her body had burned through every reserve of adrenaline and energy. But she stayed awake, stayed alert, because if any of them took a turn for the worse, she needed to know. The fire crackled. Outside, the blizzard raged on. Inside the cave, 11 massive wolves breathed, in and out, alive. Astrid checked her watch, 10:34 p.m. She'd treated all 11 wolves in 47 minutes. The same amount of time Garrett had needed to destroy her life. She allowed herself one small smile, one moment of victory. She'd been exiled to die. Instead, she'd survived. And she'd saved 11 lives in the process. Not bad for a worthless Omega. Her eyes drifted closed just for a second, just to rest them. When she opened them again, the raven-haired male was awake and staring at her. His eyes were no longer gold. They were a deep, piercing blue that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Intelligent, assessing, powerful. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was rough, damaged from the wound and the poison, but it carried an unmistakable tone of command. This was not just an alpha. This was the alpha. Astrid tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She swallowed, tried again. Astrid Lowell, exiled Omega, Shadow Pine Pack. She paused, studying his face, the tactical gear with royal insignia. "Who are you?" The male studied her for a long moment, took in her shredded blood-stained scrubs, her frost-damaged hands wrapped in makeshift bandages, her sea-green eyes that refused to look away, despite every Omega instinct screaming at her to submit. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from harsh warrior to something almost gentle. "Theron Blackwood," he said, "AlphaKing of the Northern Territories." He paused, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "And I believe you just saved my life." Astrid's world tilted sideways. AlphaKing. Those two words echoed in her head, refusing to make sense. The AlphaKing, ruler of every pack from the Canadian border to the Rio Grande, commander of the Royal Guard, direct descendant of the first wolves, was lying on a cave floor, covered in her makeshift bandages and moonvine paste, and she just saved his life wearing blood-stained medical scrubs. Her voice cracked. She tried again. Your Majesty, I didn't know. I just saw wolves who needed help. Theron Blackwood attempted to sit up, made it about 6 inches, and fell back with a grunt of pain. Even weakened by poison and blood loss, the sheer presence of him was overwhelming. This close, Astrid could see the breadth of his shoulders. Beneath the torn tactical vest, the scars crossing his chest and arms, marks of a warrior who'd fought for his position, not inherited it unopposed. His raven dark hair was matted with sweat and blood, but somehow still held an aristocratic sweep. Stay down, Astrid said, her healer instinct overriding her terror. The antidote is working, but you've lost a lot of blood. If you tear those stitches, I don't have supplies to redo them. The AlphaKing blinked at her. Then, impossibly, he obeyed. Lay back down on the stone floor without protest. Around them, the other wolves were beginning to stir. Groans echoed through the cave as consciousness returned to bodies that had been hovering at death's door. Astrid's fire cast flickering shadows across the space, illuminating faces twisted in pain as nerves reawakened. Report, Theron said, his voice barely above a whisper, but still carrying absolute authority. Who's alive? A massive shape pushed itself upright near the back of the cave. The red-bearded male, moving like every muscle, had been replaced with ground glass. Captain Wyatt Morrison, Your Majesty, present and pissed off. Lieutenant Boone Fletcher, this sandy-haired male with the throat wound, sat up slowly, one hand pressed to his bandages. Alive. Barely. Sergeant Dax Hartley, a lean man with close-cropped brown hair and medic's insignia on his torn tactical gear. Functioning. The Omega did exceptional work. One by one they called out. 10 voices, total not counting Theron. The 11th wolf, the one Astrid had found already dead, lay silent in the shadows, a blanket respectfully covering his face. Private Sterling didn't make it, Wyatt said, quietly, his voice rough with grief. Took an arrow through the heart, died instantly. A heavy silence fell. These men had lost a brother. For warriors like this, that won't cut deeper than any poison. He died protecting his king. Theron said, his voice rough with grief and determination. We'll bring him home with full honors. His family will want for nothing. Then those piercing blue eyes turned back to Astrid. You said you're exiled from Shadowpine Pack. It wasn't a question, but Astrid nodded anyway. Yes, Your Majesty, tonight. Alpha Garrett Kane sentenced me to exile during the Blood Moon Blizzard. Something dangerous flickered across Theron's face. That's a death sentence. Yes. What was your crime? Astrid hesitated. How did you tell the AlphaKing that you suspected your former Alpha of murder and treason, that you'd found evidence of FA poison and black market dealings, that you'd been exiled not for breaking laws, but for getting too close to the truth? But these wolves had been shot with the same poison, the same black ichor that had stained that border warrior's wounds. Theron saw her hesitation. The truth, Astrid Lowell. I don't have patience for politics right now. So she told him everything. Her mother's death 10 years ago, supposedly from fever but suspiciously sudden. The suspicious pattern of illnesses in the pack. Over the years, strong wolves dying from infections that shouldn't have been fatal. The border warrior she had treated this afternoon, the FA poison in his tissue that she'd confirmed with Silverwood sap testing. The way Garrett had called her to the choosing ceremony and publicly humiliated her before exile. And when the Wraithclaws caught me in the blizzard, she finished, the leader said Garrett had paid them 10,000 silver to make sure I didn't see morning. He wanted the blizzard to cover up my murder. The temperature in the cave dropped 10 degrees. Not from the weather, but from the cold fury radiating off every conscious royal guard. Wraithclaws. Wyatt growled, his massive hands clenching into fists. Those fey-blooded bastards attacked us too. Ambush at 0400 hours while we were inspecting the northern border. 20 of them, Boone added, his hand still pressed to his throat. Professional setup, military-grade coordination. They knew our route, our timing, our formation, everything. Theron's eyes had gone cold and calculating. Someone gave them our patrol schedule. Someone with access to classified Royal Guard information. An inside job, Dax said quietly. We've got a traitor. Astrid watched the pieces click together like a medical diagnosis. Garrett hiring Wraith Claws to kill her. Wraith Claws ambushing the Royal Guard. The same Fey poison in both attacks. AlphaKing is conspiring with the Wraith Claws, she said slowly. But why? What does he gain from attacking the Royal Guard? Theron met her eyes and she saw respect there. She'd made the connection fast, thought like a strategist despite having no military training. We were investigating him, Theron explained, following reports of illegal weapons trading possible, collusion with rogue factions, unexplained deaths in his pack. If we'd completed our inspection, we would have found evidence, seized his records, exposed his operations. But now you're supposed to be dead, Astrid finished. Investigation closed. And Kane continues his operations without interference. Exactly. But you're not dead, Astrid said. No. A grim smile. Thanks to you. The weight of that settled over her like a physical thing. She'd accidentally disrupted a major conspiracy, had saved the AlphaKing's life, and blown apart whatever plot Garrett had been weaving. And Garrett thought she was dead. Thought the blizzard or the Wraith Claws had finished her. That was an advantage. The only advantage they had. What time is it? Theron asked suddenly. Astrid checked her watch, 4:03 a.m. We've been unconscious for about 6 hours. Theron tried to sit up again, made it a bit farther this time with visible effort. The poison should have killed us in 12. How did you counteract it? Moonvine antidote. My mother taught me the formula before she died. Astrid moved to his side, helped support his back with her arm. 3 parts moonvine, 1 part pine resin, 2 parts liquid, but you're not fully healed. The antidote neutralizes the poison, but your body still needs time to recover from the cellular damage already done. Time is a luxury we don't have. Theron looked at his men taking inventory with a commander's eye. How many can walk? Around the cave, the Royal Guard attempted to stand. It was not an impressive showing. Wyatt made it to his feet but swayed dangerously, catching himself against the wall. Boone managed standing but kept one hand braced for support. Dax the medic looked functional but pale as paper. The others were in various states of barely mobile. Out of 11 living guards, maybe 6 could walk more than 100 yards without collapsing. Maybe. We need to get to the Royal Outpost. Theron said, his strategic mind already working through options. It's 10 miles southwest of here. We can call for reinforcements, get proper medical care, and organize a response to Kane's treachery. 10 miles, Astrid said quietly. In a blizzard, with wounded men who can barely stand. You have a better suggestion. Actually, she did. You stay here, Astrid said. The entire cave went silent. Every eye turned to her. She forced herself to continue despite the weight of their stares. The blizzard will die down in the next few hours, according to weather patterns. The Royal Guards, who can walk, escort you to the outpost once visibility improves. But we need evidence against Kane, and we need it before he realizes you're alive. What kind of evidence? Wyatt asked, his tactical mind engaging. Kane keeps records, financial ledgers, correspondence, operational details. I know where. Astrid turned to Theron. My mother was chief healer. She had access to the pack's medical bay, and she discovered Kane was hiding something there. A safe behind the anatomy chart on the east wall. Before she died, she told me to remember that hiding place. To never forget it. I never understood why until tonight. You want to go back, Theron said flatly. Back to the pack that exiled you past the Alpha who wants you dead to rob his safe. When he put it that way, it sounded insane. I'm already dead as far as Kane knows, Astrid pointed out. He thinks the Wraith Claws or the blizzard finished me. No one will be looking for a dead Omega. I can use the servant tunnels, get in and out without being seen. And if you're caught, Astrid met his eyes. Then I was dead anyway. At least this way it means something. Theron studied her for a long moment. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was impressed or appalled by her plan or considering having her restrained for suggesting something so dangerous. You're not going alone, he finally said. Your Majesty, not alone. His tone, left no room for argument. He would turn to his guards. "Boone, you're our best scout. Can you move?" Lieutenant Boone Fletcher straightened despite the obvious pain radiating through his frame. "I can move, sir." "Wyatt, you're demolitions, but you've done infiltration work. Status." Captain Wyatt Morrison rolled his massive shoulders experimentally, testing range of motion. "I felt better, but I felt worse. I'm functional enough." "Dax, I need you here with the others. Monitor their recovery. If anyone takes a turn for the worse, you have my permission to use whatever measures necessary to keep them alive. That includes commandeering civilian medical facilities if needed." "Understood, Your Majesty." Theron turned back to Astrid. "You'll take Boone and Wyatt. They'll provide security and backup. You get in, get the evidence, get out. No heroics, no risks beyond the mission parameters." "Understood." Astrid wanted to argue, wanted to point out that bringing 2 massive royal guards made her invisible Omega plan significantly less subtle. But the look in Theron's eyes stopped her. He was compromising. Letting her go at all was probably killing him. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. Alpha Kings didn't send civilians into danger. They certainly didn't send wounded Omegas who just saved their lives into enemy territory. But he was trusting her, trusting that she knew what she was doing. "Understood," she agreed. The next hour was intensive preparation. Astrid checked and rechecked every guard's wounds, applying fresh moonvine paste where inflammation persisted. She inventoried their supplies, limited rations, basic first aid gear, tactical equipment that was mostly shredded but salvageable. Wyatt and Boone geared up with what remained of their equipment. Tactical knives, tested for sharpness, night vision goggles with cracked lenses, but still marginally functional, a single working radio with maybe an hour of battery life remaining. Rules of engagement. Theron said, his voice stronger now as the antidote continued its work through his system. Stealth is priority 1. If you're discovered, you retreat immediately. The mission is not worth your lives. Any of your lives. His eyes lingered on Astrid at that last part. "Yes, sir." Wyatt and Boone chorused. Theron looked at Astrid. "I know you're not under my command, but I'll be careful," Astrid promised. "I have no interest in dying tonight. I've already survived too much to waste it being reckless now." Something flickered in Theron's eyes. Respect maybe, or something deeper that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "There's one more thing," she said quietly. She pulled the small vial from her medical kit, the tissue sample from the border warrior, the evidence of FA poison she'd collected before everything went to hell. "If something happens to me, this proves Kane has access to FA poison. It's not much, but it's something. Lab analysis will show the chemical signature." Theron took the vial, carefully held it up to the firelight. The black stain on the tissue was clearly visible, damning. "How did you know to test for this?" "My mother taught me. She said a good healer always questions suspicious symptoms, always looks deeper than the obvious diagnosis." Astrid paused. "I think she was investigating Kane when she died. I think she found something concrete and he killed her for it before she could report it." "Then we'll find it," Theron said. And it wasn't a comfort or a hope. It was a promise delivered with the absolute certainty of a king who'd never broken his word. "And we'll make him answer for every crime, every death, every betrayal. I swear it." The way he said it not as political rhetoric but as personal vow sent a shiver down Astrid's spine. This was a man who kept his promises, who would move mountains to see justice done. She believed him. Outside, the wind had finally started to ease. The howling had dropped to a steady moan, and through the cave entrance, Astrid could see the first hint of pre-dawn grey touching the eastern sky. "Time to move," Wyatt said. They left the cave in single file. Boone led with practiced silence his scout training, making him nearly invisible despite his size. Astrid followed, trying to copy his movements, the way he placed his feet, how he used terrain for concealment. Wyatt brought up the rear, his large frame somehow quiet, protecting their six. The snow had stopped falling, but what had already accumulated was hip-deep in places, and still pristine white. The temperature had risen to a balmy -5 degrees. Progress was slow. Every few minutes, Boone would raise a closed fist and they'd freeze, while he scanned for threats with eyes and ears, and that sixth sense good scouts developed. Wraith claws, Kane's patrols, or just dangerous terrain hidden under deceptive snow. Astrid's body screamed in protest with every step. She'd been awake for over 24 hours, now had survived exile and hypothermia, and had spent hours performing emergency medicine on her knees. Her hands were raw and cracked from the cold wrapped in strips of blanket. The scratches on her back from the Wraith Claw's attack burned with every movement, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other. Survival mode was something she understood intimately after a lifetime of being Omega in Garrett's pack. They reached the edge of Shadowpine territory as true dawn broke. Pale pink light spread across the snow, turning the frozen forest into a winter painting that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. "Packhouse is a quarter-mile that way," Astrid whispered, pointing through the trees. "Medical Bay has a service entrance on the north side, used for deliveries and Omega access. Should be unlocked. They never lock it because Omegas come and go all hours for emergency supplies." "Should be." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "It was always unlocked when I worked there, but that was 14 hours ago. Things might have changed since they think I'm dead." Boone studied the terrain with a tactical eye, reading it like others read books. "We'll approach from the east, use the tree line for cover. Astrid, you mentioned there are servant tunnels." "Yes, they connect all the major buildings underground. Omegas use them to move supplies without disrupting the main halls or being seen by higher ranks." "Perfect. We'll insert through the tunnels, get to the medical bay, extract the evidence and exfiltrate the same way." Boone made it sound so simple, so routine, like breaking into an Alpha's fortress was just another Tuesday. Astrid had to remind herself that these men were elite royal guards. This was literally their job description. They moved through the forest like shadows given form. Astrid tried to copy their movements, the way they placed their feet to minimize sound, how they used terrain for concealment, the hand signals they used to communicate silently. She was hopelessly clumsy compared to their fluid grace, but she did her best not to slow them down. The pack house loomed ahead, a massive timber structure that looked like a luxury ski lodge mixed with a fortress. Warm light glowed in several windows. Smoke rose from 3 chimneys. Inside, the pack would be waking up, starting their day completely unaware that their alpha was a traitor and murderer. Movement. Boone breathed, barely audible. North side. 2 guards. Astrid peered around the tree trunk. 2 beta warriors stood near the service entrance, looking cold and miserable. They weren't expecting trouble. Their posture was relaxed, their attention more on their coffee thermoses and complaining to each other than on the forest. "Can you get past them?" Wyatt asked. Astrid quietly. She studied the guards, recognizing them. Both were mid-rank betas, not particularly observant or motivated. And she knew something they didn't, the delivery schedule that hadn't changed in 10 years. "The baker arrives at 6 a.m. every morning without fail," she whispered. "Those guards will move to help unload supplies. It's heavy work and they're lazy. When they do, we'll have a 3-minute window while they're focused on the truck." "How do you know the baker arrives at 6? Boone asked. "Because I used to help unload the delivery every single morning for 10 years. Same time, same routine every day." Right on schedule, like clockwork, a battered pickup truck rumbled up the service road. The guards immediately perked up and moved to help, grumbling loudly about the early hour and the cold. The driver, old Marcus, the baker who'd always snuck Astrid extra rolls when no one was looking, climbed out and started complaining even louder about the blizzard damaging his equipment and making roads impassable. "Now," Astrid breathed. Theirs moved as one unit, fast and low, using the truck's bulk as visual cover. Across 20 yards of open ground that felt like 20 miles, and through the service entrance before the guards even turned around. Inside, the warmth hit like a physical force. Astrid's frozen body wanted to collapse right there in the entryway and just absorb the heat. But they kept moving into the shadowed corridor that led to the servant tunnels. Which way? Wyatt asked, his voice barely a whisper. Astrid oriented herself, calling up a mental map she'd walked thousands of times. Left then second, right then straight for about 100 yards. The medical bay access is marked with a faded red cross painted on the door. The tunnels were narrow and utilitarian, lit by bare bulbs every 20 feet that created pools of light separated by deep shadows. At this hour, they should be empty. Omegas didn't start their work until 7. But Astrid's heart hammered anyway, her nervous system expecting discovery at every corner. They reached the medical bay access without incident. Astrid pressed her ear to the door, listening with held breath. Silence. She eased it open with careful pressure. The medical bay was exactly as she'd left it. Examination tables with fresh sheets, supply cabinets, organized by category, the faint smell of antiseptic and herbs. Her blood-stained platter still lay on the floor where she dropped it during the choosing ceremony, a stark reminder. Had that really only been 9 hours ago? It felt like a lifetime. The safe is behind that chart, Astrid whispered, pointing to the large anatomy diagram on the east wall. Boone moved to the door, positioning himself as lookout with his back to the wall and a clear view of both approaches. Wyatt joined Astrid at the wall, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her lift the heavy frame down carefully. Behind it, just as Astrid remembered from childhood, was a wall safe. Old-fashioned combination lock, the kind that required patience and a steady hand and experience. "Can you open it?" Wyatt asked, keeping his voice low. "I don't know the combination, but I can try to pick it." "Then how?" Astrid pulled a piece of wire from her medical kit, bent it with practiced movements into a crude lockpick. "My mother taught me. She said sometimes locked doors keep secrets that need to be revealed. That a healer's job isn't just fixing bodies, but exposing the poisons that sicken communities." She'd never actually picked a lock before, but she'd watched her mother do it once years ago, and she had steady hands, trained by years of delicate sutures and good spatial reasoning. The first attempt failed, the wire slipping. The second attempt failed, sweat beading despite the cool air. On the third try, she felt something shift. A small click that sounded like thunder in the quiet room. The lock gave. The safe swung open. Inside was a treasure trove of damning evidence. A leather ledger, its pages filled with transactions in Garrett's distinctive angular handwriting. Small vials of black liquid. For poison, at least a dozen doses worth a fortune. Letters with official-looking seals from other alphas. Financial records showing payments to WC mercenaries and northern distributors. And in the very back, a yellowed envelope addressed to Sarah Grace Personal in Garrett's hand. Astrid's breath caught, her mother's name, in Garrett's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter dated 10 years ago. Sarah Grace knows too much about the FA poison shipments. She's been asking questions about the deaths, correlating timelines, requesting to see financial records. Eliminate her quietly. Make it look like natural causes. Payment on completion, 5,000 silver. GK. It was a death warrant. Her mother's murder written out in black and white, kept like a trophy or insurance policy. "Astrid," Wyatt said quietly, his voice gentle. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." She couldn't respond, couldn't speak past the rage and grief choking her throat like a physical hand. She'd known intellectually that Garrett had killed her mother, but seeing the proof, seeing it reduced to a transaction worth 5,000 silver, seeing her mother's life valued at less than a used vehicle. "We need to move," Boone hissed from the door, urgent. "I hear voices, multiple people approaching." Astrid shoved everything into her medical kit with shaking hands. Ledger vials, letters, her mother's death warrant. Evidence of treason, murder, and conspiracy. They closed the safe, rehung the anatomy chart, and slipped back into the tunnel just as the medical bay door opened. "Sure I left it here," a voice said, female unfamiliar. The Alpha wanted the inventory report for his morning briefing. Well, it's not here now. Check the main office. Footsteps retreated. Astrid, Wyatt and Boone stood frozen in the tunnel, barely breathing, hearts hammering. Then they ran. Back through the corridors, moving faster now, caution giving way to urgent speed. They were compromised. If anyone checked that safe, if anyone noticed the anatomy chart was slightly crooked. Stop! The shout came from behind them. A guard young beta male standing at the intersection. His eyes widened as he saw them, two massive warriors in Royal Guard tactical gear flanking a small Omega in blood-stained scrubs. Intruders, he yelled, his voice cracking. Sound the... Wyatt moved with shocking speed for someone his size. One moment, he was next to Astrid. The next, he had the guard in a headlock, applying precise pressure to the carotid artery. The guard struggled for 3 seconds, then went limp. He's alive, Wyatt said, lowering the unconscious body gently. But we need to move. Now. They'll sound full alert in less than 2 minutes. Alarms started blaring throughout the building, confirming his assessment. Throughout the pack house, warriors would be mobilizing. A full lockdown protocol in less than 2 minutes. The main entrance is out, Boone said, his tactical mind racing through options. They'll have it covered first. We need another exit. The kitchen, Astrid said, remembering the layout. There's a back door that opens to the garden. From there we can reach the tree line if we're fast. They ran. Behind them, shouts and pounding feet. The pack had been mobilized, and now the pack was hunting. They burst into the kitchen, startling the early morning cook staff. Elder Margot was there preparing breakfast with 2 other Omegas. Her eyes widened as she saw Astrid. "Child," she gasped. "You're alive, goddess be praised." "Can't talk," Astrid panted. "Need to run. Sorry." Margot didn't hesitate. She grabbed a large pot of boiling water off the stove and positioned herself at the kitchen entrance like a warrior. "Go. I'll slow them down. Make them pay for what they did to you." "Margot." "Go." They went. Through the kitchen, out the garden door, across the snowy yard. Behind them, someone screamed as Margot made good on her promise with scalding water. The tree line was 50 yards away. 40, 30. Arrows whistled through the air. One passed so close to Astrid's head, she felt the wind of its passage, felt individual fletching feathers brush her hair. "Zigzag," Boone ordered. They zigzagged. More arrows. One caught Wyatt in the shoulder, punched through his already damaged tactical vest with brutal force. He grunted but kept running, didn't slow. 20 yards. 10. 5. They crashed into the forest and kept going. Behind them, the pack gave chase, but in the dense trees where branches grew thick, the Royal Guard's superior training gave them the advantage. They knew how to disappear, how to use terrain, how to become ghosts even when injured. After 10 minutes of hard running, Boone called a halt. They crouched in a dense thicket of pine, breathing hard, listening with every sense heightened. The sounds of pursuit had faded. Either the pack had lost their trail or given up. "Everyone intact?" Boone asked, quietly, already assessing. "Arrow in the shoulder," Wyatt reported matter-of-factly. "Shallow penetration. I'll live. Probably." "I'm okay," Astrid said. She wasn't really. Her vision kept going grey at the edges, her entire body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Crashed, but she was functional enough to keep moving. "Then we keep moving, back to the cave. His Majesty needs to see this evidence immediately." They traveled in silence, moving as fast as Astrid's exhausted body could manage. The sun rose higher, turning the frozen landscape into blinding white that hurt to look at directly. By the time the cave entrance came into view, Astrid was operating on pure willpower and spite. Theron met them at the entrance. He'd managed to stand, though he leaned against the cave wall for support. His eyes scanned them with a commander's precision, cataloging injuries in seconds. "Report," he ordered. Astrid wordlessly handed him her medical kit, too tired for lengthy explanation. He opened it, saw the ledger, the vials, the letters, saw her mother's death warrant. His expression went absolutely cold. Not angry cold, something deeper. The cold of winter ice that killed silently. The cold of justice that would not be denied. "This is enough," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "More than enough." "To do what?" Astrid asked, though she already knew. Theron looked up, and his eyes were the blue of glaciers that crushed everything in their path. "To end Garrett Kane, permanently." Around the cave, the royal guards who could stand were standing. Those who couldn't were sitting up straight, alert and ready. All of them wore the same expression, grim determination and absolute loyalty to their king. "The blizzard has passed." Theron continued, his strategic mind already 10 steps ahead. "We can reach the royal outpost in 3 hours at normal pace. From there, I'll convene an emergency session of the regional council. Kane will be tried for treason, for murder, for conspiracy with rogue factions." "He'll run," Boone said, thinking tactically. "Once he realizes we're alive and his safe was breached." "He already knows," Wyatt interrupted, touching his shoulder wound. "We were spotted. The pack saw royal guards in their territory. Kane's not stupid. He'll know we survived the ambush." "Then we move fast." Theron turned to Dax. "Status of our wounded. 6 can travel immediately, Your Majesty. 3 need another few hours of antidote integration. 2 shouldn't move for at least a day without risking permanent damage." "We can't wait a day. Kane will use every hour to prepare his defense or escape." "I know, sir." Theron made the decision with the certainty of a man who'd commanded through wars. "Boone, Wyatt, you'll stay with the 2 who can't travel. Defensive position here. Dax, you're with me as my primary medic. We'll take the 6 who are mobile and head for the outpost. Once we have reinforcements and secure communications, we'll send a full extraction team back for the rest of you." "Your Majesty," Wyatt protested, his hand still pressed to his bleeding shoulder. "You need better protection than just 6 wounded guards. I need speed more than I need overwhelming force, and I need Kane to think we're still vulnerable." Theron's smile was cold and dangerous, and absolutely certain. "Let him believe he still has a chance. It'll keep him from running until we have all our pieces in position on the board." He turned to Astrid, and his expression softened fractionally. "You're coming with us." You're the only witness to the Wraithclaw conspiracy with direct testimony. Your testimony is crucial for the treason charge." He paused, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "And Kane wants you dead. Staying here makes you a target for another attack. At the outpost, I can protect you properly." Astrid wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she'd survived just fine on her own for 9 hours, that she didn't need protection. But the truth was simpler. She was exhausted, hurt, running on fumes and stubbornness. And something about the way Theron looked at her, not with pity, but with respect and concern that felt genuine, made her want to accept his protection. "Okay," she said quietly. They left within the hour. 7 royal guards and 1 Omega moving through the forest as the sun climbed higher. The temperature had risen to a relatively pleasant 15 degrees. The snow crunched under their feet, and birds had started singing again. It felt like the world was waking up after a nightmare. Astrid walked beside Theron, matching his pace. He moved stiffly, his wounds still healing under the moonvine treatment, but his determination was unshakable. "Thank you," he said quietly after they'd been walking for 20 minutes, "for saving my guards, for risking yourself to get that evidence. You don't need to thank me. I did what needed doing." Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have run from that cave and never looked back. Astrid thought about that, about the moment she'd had to choose. "My mother used to say that healers don't have the luxury of running. Someone has to stand and fight death even when it seems impossible, even when it's dangerous." Your mother sounds like she was remarkable. She was. Astrid touched the death warrant in her kit through the fabric. And Garrett Kane murdered her because she was getting too close to the truth about his poison operation. "He'll answer for it," Theron promised, and it wasn't empty comfort. It was a vow. Before the council, before his pack, before the moon goddess herself, he will answer for every crime. They walked in companionable silence for a while. Then Astrid asked the question that had been nagging at her since the cave. Why were you really investigating Kane illegal weapons trading? Doesn't seem important enough for the Alpha King himself to personally inspect. Theron glanced at her, measuring something in his mind. Then he sighed. Because Kane isn't working alone. We've been tracking a conspiracy for 2 years now, multiple alphas, working with rogue factions, building private armies, stockpiling forbidden weapons like PMFA poison. Kane is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. How large? Large enough to threaten the stability of the entire kingdom. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. Someone is trying to start a civil war, Astrid. A war between packs that would tear every territory apart and kill thousands. We've been trying to identify the leaders to cut off the head of the snake before it strikes. And Kane is a mid-level player, important regionally, but not irreplaceable in the larger conspiracy. Theron looked at her with those intense blue eyes. But the evidence you recovered, the financial records, the correspondence with other alphas that might lead us to the real leaders, the ones orchestrating everything. Astrid's mind reeled. She'd thought this was just about one corrupt alpha and her mother's murder. Instead, she'd stumbled into something that could determine the fate of every pack in North America. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to complicate your investigation." Theron stopped walking abruptly, turned to face her fully. "Astrid, you saved the Alpha King's life. You exposed a traitor. You recovered evidence that might prevent a war. Don't apologize. Ever. You've done more for this kingdom in one night than most people do in a lifetime." His intensity pinned her in place. This close, she could see flecks of silver in his blue eyes, like stars could smell the pine and snow scent of him, mixed with herbs and something uniquely him. Could feel something pulling between them, invisible but undeniable and getting stronger. Her wolf, quiet for so long, suppressed and beaten down, suddenly raised its head, looked at Theron's wolf with recognition that bypassed logic. Mate, it whispered with absolute certainty. Astrid's eyes widened. No, that was impossible. Fated mates were rare, 1 in 10,000 pairings. And they certainly didn't happen between Omega healers and Alpha Kings who ruled territories. But her wolf knew, and judging by the way Theron's breath caught the way his eyes darkened and his pupils dilated, his wolf knew too. "We should keep moving," Astrid said, her voice unsteady. "The outpost is still 90 minutes away." "Yes," Theron agreed. But he didn't move immediately, not for several long heartbeats where the world narrowed to just the two of them. Then he stepped back deliberately and the moment broke like glass. They walked on, but something fundamental had changed between them. Something terrifying and impossible to ignore, now that it had been acknowledged. Ahead through the trees, Astrid could see the walls of the royal outpost rising against the sky. Behind them, back in Shadowpine territory, Garrett Kane was realizing his perfect plan had failed catastrophically. And between them, in the space of one impossible night, an Omega and a King had found something neither had been looking for. Now they just had to survive long enough to figure out what to do about it. The royal outpost was a fortress disguised as a wilderness ranger station. From a distance, it looked like any other mountain facility, timber construction, blending into the forest stone foundation, satellite dishes for weather monitoring. But as they approached, with the sun climbing toward noon, Astrid noticed the details. The reinforced walls designed to withstand explosives. The strategic sightlines providing overlapping fields of fire. The way the windows were positioned to allow defenders clear shots while remaining protected. The subtle berms and barriers that would funnel attackers into kill zones. This was a military installation designed by people who understood warfare. One built to hold against the serious sustained attacks. 2 guards stood at the main gate, both going rigid as they spotted Theron. Recognition flashed across their faces, followed immediately by shock at his condition. The torn clothing, the makeshift bandages, the way he moved like every step cost him. "Your Majesty," the senior guard, a grizzled beta with sergeant's stripes and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, snapped to attention. "We've been trying to reach your patrol for 9 hours. Communications went dark after your last check-in. What happened? Ambush, Theron said, curtly, his voice carrying command despite exhaustion. Get Commander Reeves now and prepare the secure conference room. We have a critical situation that requires immediate action. The guards moved with military precision, one running inside while the other maintained position. Within minutes, Astrid found herself inside the outpost's surprisingly spacious interior. The main hall was warm heated by a massive stone fireplace that reminded her of the cave. Medical supplies lined one wall in organized cabinets. Communications equipment covered another, screens showing weather patterns and satellite imagery. Maps of the territory dominated the third wall, marked with colored pins that probably indicated patrol routes, known threats, strategic positions. A tall woman with steel gray hair, cut military short, and eyes like flint strode into the room. Commander Reeves, Astrid assumed correctly. She wore the Royal Guard insignia on her uniform and carried herself like someone who'd fought in more battles than she cared to count and won most of them. Theron, she said, dropping the formal title in her evident relief. When you missed check-in and didn't respond to emergency protocols, we feared the worst. We were preparing a search and rescue operation. You should have feared the worst, Theron said grimly. We were hit with military grade for poison arrows, lost Sterling. The rest of us would be dead if not for her. He gestured to Astrid, who suddenly felt every eye in the room focus on her with laser intensity. She was acutely aware of how she must look, blood-stained, scrubs torn and filthy wild hair escaping its braided exhausted Omega, who'd somehow survived the impossible night. This is Astrid Lowell. Theron continued, his voice carrying pride that made her chest tighten. Exiled from Shadowpine Pack last night during the Blood Moon blizzard. She found us dying in a cave, saved 11 royal guards, using her medical knowledge, recovered critical evidence, and exposed a conspiracy that goes deeper than we initially suspected. Commander Reeves studied Astrid for a long moment, with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Exiled in the Blood Moon blizzard. Yes, ma'am. And you survived. Yes, ma'am. And saved the Alpha King's life. Aye, yes, ma'am. Reeves's stern expression softened infinitesimally, a slight curve at the corner of her mouth. Then you have the gratitude of the Royal Guard, and mine personally. Anyone who saves my king's life is welcome in any facility I command. She turned to Theron. Brief me. Everything. Leave nothing out. They gathered around the largest table, its surface scarred from years of tactical planning. Astrid laid out the evidence with careful hands, ledger, fey poison vials, correspondence, her mother's death warrant, each item a piece of a larger damning picture. Theron explained the ambush, the Wraith Claw involvement, the direct connection to Garrett Keane. Dax added medical details about the poison, how close they'd all come to organ failure and death, how Astrid's quick action and knowledge had been the only thing standing between them and their graves. And Astrid told her story. The border warrior's suspicious infection that had started everything, Garrett's calculated public humiliation, the exile as assassination, the Wraith Claws explicitly admitting they'd been paid 10,000 silver. By the time they finished, Reeves's expression had gone from concerned to absolutely furious with barely controlled rage. That son of a bitch, she said quietly, each word precisely enunciated. Attempting to assassinate the Alpha King is automatic death sentence under territorial law, but add conspiracy with Wraith Claws, black market FA poison trafficking, multiple premeditated murders. She looked at the evidence spread across the table like damning puzzle pieces. This is enough to execute him 3 times over. Maybe 4 if we stretch it. The question is timing and approach. Theron said, his strategic mind already working through options. He knows we survived. We were spotted at Shadowpine during the evidence retrieval. He'll be preparing his defense or planning to run to a territory outside our jurisdiction. We don't give him the chance to do either. Reeves pulled out a detailed map, started marking positions with practiced efficiency. The regional council is convening in 36 hours at Council Grove for the seasonal summit. Every major alpha within 500 miles will be there, including Kane. Standard protocol requires attendance unless there's a documented emergency. We expose him there in front of witnesses with undeniable evidence and multiple corroborating testimonies. 36 hours. Theron mused, calculating angles. Can we contain him that long without tipping our hand? We'll have to. Moving against him now with just outpost resources gives him time to spin a narrative to other alphas, claim it's a power grab or persecution. Reeves smiled coldly. But at Council Grove, with 30 alphas present and the evidence we have, he'll have nowhere to run and no one willing to shelter him. He could still flee before the council if he gets spooked, Dax pointed out, thinking through contingencies. Not if he thinks he's still safe, Astrid said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. She swallowed hard, but continued forcing confidence she didn't entirely feel. He believes I'm dead. He thinks the evidence is buried with me in the snow. If he knew the safe had been opened, that his records were missing, he'd already be gone. His arrogance is our advantage. So we use his arrogance against him, Theron said slowly, a predatory smile forming. Let him believe he's won. Let him think his problems died in the blizzard. Then spring the trap at council when he has no escape routes and maximum exposure. Risky, Reeves said, playing devil's advocate. If he gets spooked in the next 36 hours, then we lose him and his co-conspirators scatter like roaches when the light hits. Theron finished. No, we do this right. We end the entire conspiracy, not just one mid-level alpha. We cut off all the heads of this hydra simultaneously. He turned to Astrid, his expression softening. I'm sorry, this means you'll need to stay hidden for 36 hours. If Kane learns you survived, the whole plan falls apart like a house of cards. Astrid nodded, understanding the necessity. 36 hours. She'd survived 9 impossible hours. She could manage 36 more. There's one complication, Dax said, thinking through protocols. Military protocol requires we report Your Majesty's injuries to the Royal Medical Corps with detailed incident reports. That means paperwork, official channels, multiple layers of bureaucracy. If Kane has anyone monitoring those channels through bribed officials, we report I was injured during a routine border patrol. Theron decided with the certainty of someone who'd navigated bureaucracy before. Equipment failure during a training exercise, minor wounds, already treated and returning to duty. Nothing suspicious that would raise flags. Dax, you'll file the report with minimal details and maximum bureaucratic vagueness. And the 11 guards who were poisoned. Training exercise gone wrong during inclement weather. Non-lethal injuries sustained. They're recovering at a secure medical facility. Theron looked around the table with authority. The truth stays in this room and with essential personnel only. Only people who absolutely need to know get briefed. Everyone else gets the cover story. Reeves nodded approvingly. I'll brief my security team personally, but the information doesn't leave the outpost compound. What do you need for the council confrontation? A medical examiner who can verify the FA poison samples and testify about toxicity. A documents expert to authenticate the ledger and letters. And a prosecutor who can present the case so clearly that no alpha can claim doubt or confusion. Theron listed systematically. I'll have all 3 ready and prepped within 12 hours. Reeves started making notes with efficient shorthand. Anything else? Theron looked at Astrid with an expression she couldn't quite read. She'll need protection. Kane has already tried to kill her once. He'll try again if he discovers she's alive. I'll assign a security detail from my best. No, Astrid interrupted, and both Theron and Reeves looked at her in surprise. I mean, thank you, but a security detail makes me visible. Right now, I'm a dead Omega, an exile who froze in the blizzard. Let's keep it that way for maximum tactical advantage. She has a valid point, Reeves admitted grudgingly. Visible security draws attention, but you'll stay within the outpost walls at all times. No exceptions, no matter how boring it gets. Agreed, Astrid said quickly, before Theron could argue for tighter restrictions. The meeting continued for another hour, working through logistics and contingencies and backup plans for the backup plans. By the time they finished, Astrid was swaying on her feet with exhaustion that had moved past tired into a strange floating sensation. Dax, Theron said quietly, his eyes tracking her unstable stance. Get her to the medical bay. Make sure those wounds are properly treated by someone who wasn't working on themselves. She's been running on adrenaline and stubbornness for 12 hours straight. Aye, Your Majesty. Astrid wanted to protest that she was fine, but her body chose that moment to betray her spectacularly. Her knees buckled without warning, and she would have fallen hard if Theron hadn't caught her with reflexes that shouldn't have been possible given his own injuries. Easy, he murmured, his arm around her waist, providing solid support. You're allowed to be human, Astrid. You've more than earned it. His touch sent electricity through her exhausted nervous system, that pull intensifying. Her wolf recognized his wolf with absolute certainty that bypassed all logic. Mate, she pulled away quickly before she did something stupid like lean into his warmth and never let go. I can walk on my own power. She couldn't really, but she made it to the medical bay with Dax's support, and that was close enough to maintain dignity. The outpost's medical facility was better equipped than Shadowpine's had been, with modern diagnostic tools and well-stocked pharmaceutical cabinets. Dax worked efficiently, cleaning the wraith claw scratches on her back with careful attention, treating her frostbite with specialized ointments, checking for signs of hypothermia-related damage that might manifest later. You're lucky, he said, applying antibiotic ointment with practiced hands. Another hour in that cold, and you'd have permanent nerve damage in your extremities. As it is, you'll need to keep these fingers and toes warm for the next week while full sensation returns. I don't feel very lucky, Astrid admitted, her voice muffled by the examination table. You survived when you shouldn't have. That's luckier than most people get. Dax's expression softened as he worked. And you saved my life. Saved all of us. I watched you work in that cave. You're a damn good healer, Astrid Lowell. Better than most certified medics I've served with. Coming from another medic, someone who understood the work, the compliment meant more than he probably knew. Your mother trained you well, Dax asked, his tone conversational as he bandaged. As much as she could before she died. Most of it I learned from her journals, after from notes she left specifically for me. Astrid winced as he pressed on a particularly deep scratch. She was careful to write everything down in detail, almost like she knew she wouldn't have time to teach me properly through normal apprenticeship. She knew Kane was after her. She was preparing you. I think so. Near the end, she kept telling me to remember specific things. Remember where the safe is hidden, Astrid. Remember the Moonvine formula. Remember that healers serve life, not power. Remember that truth is worth dying for. Astrid's throat tightened with emotion. She was preparing me for after she was gone. I just didn't realize it until too late. Dax finished bandaging her back with professional precision. You honored her legacy tonight. Every choice you made, every risk you took. She'd be proud of the healer you've become. Would she? Astrid wasn't entirely sure. Sarah Grace had been a gentle patient at everything Astrid tried to be, but often failed at. Would her mother be proud of how violently Astrid wanted to see Kane punished? How much rage she felt burning in her chest. Get some rest, Dax ordered, helping her into a clean medical gown. Commander Reeves is assigning you quarters with a real bed. You'll be safe here behind these walls. Safe. Such a strange concept after a lifetime of never feeling truly secure. Astrid had spent 22 years never feeling truly safe, always waiting for the next insult, the next reminder of her worthlessness, the next threat. Now the AlphaKing himself had promised protection with the full weight of his authority. She slept for 15 hours straight in a real bed with clean sheets. When she finally woke, disoriented and aching in different ways, the sun was setting again. Another full day had passed, bringing them closer to the council confrontation. Only 21 hours remaining. Someone had left clean clothes folded on the chair beside her bed, practical outdoor gear in her size, thick socks, sturdy boots that actually fit, not Omega servant clothes or medical scrubs. Real clothes meant for equals. Astrid dressed slowly, her stiff muscles protesting every movement. Her reflection in the small mirror showed someone she barely recognized. The Astrid who stood in Shadowpine's great hall yesterday had been small, hunched inward, trying to be invisible. This Astrid stood straighter with shoulders back, met her own eyes in the mirror without flinching, had survived the impossible and saved an Alpha King. She was still figuring out who this new Astrid was, but she liked her better. The outpost felt different at night, quieter in some ways, but more alert. Guards moved through hallways with purpose and awareness. The communications room buzzed with constant activity. Through a window, Astrid saw Theron standing outside in the cold, talking to Commander Reeves, both studying a map spread across a tactical table. He changed clothes to proper Royal Guard uniform, now black and silver with the crown insignia on his shoulder. Even injured and exhausted, he commanded attention effortlessly. Every person who passed him straightened their posture, instinctively moved with more purpose. This was the Alpha King, not the wounded wolf she'd healed in a cave with shaking hands, but the ruler of every pack from border to border. The distance between Omega and King had never felt more obvious or impossible to cross. "You're awake," a voice said. Astrid turned to find a young beta female carrying a food tray. "I'm Corporal Maya Torres. The commander assigned me to make sure you eat proper meals, not just medical rations." Astrid took the tray gratefully, smiling at the nervous corporal. "Thank you, Corporal Torres." The food was simple, but good hot soup with actual vegetables, fresh breadfruit. Astrid ate mechanically, fueling her body because it needed fuel, not because she tasted much through her anxiety. Her mind was on the council meeting tomorrow, on what would happen when Garrett saw her alive, on the moment his perfect plan would crumble publicly. She wanted to see his face, wanted to watch him realize he'd failed spectacularly. Was that wrong? Was it unhealer-like to want revenge with such intensity? "Your mother would understand," Theron's voice said from the doorway, reading her expression. Astrid startled, nearly dropping her spoon. "I didn't hear you come in. You walk quietly." Old habit from scout training. He moved into the room, and Astrid noticed he was moving significantly better now, the antidote and rest doing their work efficiently. "You're thinking about tomorrow, about Kane and the trial." It wasn't a question, but Astrid nodded anyway. "Is it wrong to want him to suffer? I'm supposed to be a healer. Healers don't think about revenge or take pleasure in others' pain." Theron pulled up a chair, sat so they were at eye level. "Healers are also human, or wolf, whatever specific terminology you prefer." He smiled slightly. "The point is, you're allowed to want justice. You're allowed to be angry at the man who murdered your mother and tried to murder you. Those are normal, healthy emotions." "It feels like more than anger. It feels like something darker, something ugly." "It's not darkness or ugliness. It's grief that was never properly processed." Theron leaned forward with intensity. "And grief needs to be felt and acknowledged, not suppressed because it seems inconvenient or inappropriate." "What's the difference between revenge and justice?" Theron considered his words carefully. "Revenge is about making him hurt because you hurt. It's personal satisfaction. Justice is about making sure he can never hurt anyone else. It's about protecting future victims." Theron's blue eyes held hers. "Your mother couldn't get justice when she discovered his crimes. But you can, for her and for every other person Kane has destroyed over decades." Astrid thought about that. About the border warrior with poison in his wound. About Elder Margot, who'd risked everything to help her escape. About all the Omegas in Shadowpine who lived in fear of Garrett's cruelty and arbitrary judgments. "Okay," she said with new conviction. "Justice, not revenge. Protection, not satisfaction." "Good." Theron stood, then hesitated, clearly debating something. "There's something else. Something we need to discuss before tomorrow." The mate bond. Astrid knew that's what he meant. The pull between them had only grown stronger over this past day, impossible to ignore. "I know what you're going to say." Astrid said quickly, defensive. The moon goddess made a mistake. You're the Alpha King ruling territories. I'm an exiled Omega with no pack. It's impossible and inappropriate. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Theron said firmly, his voice carrying absolute certainty. And nothing about you is impossible, Astrid. You've proven that beyond any doubt. But nothing. Yes, you're Omega. Yes, I'm king. Yes, it's unprecedented and will cause political complications and make some alphas very uncomfortable. He smiled. But I fought wars, negotiated treaties with hostile factions, survived multiple assassination attempts. I think I can handle some political complications and uncomfortable alphas. Astrid's heart hammered hard enough to hurt. What are you saying exactly? I'm saying that after we deal with Cain, after the conspiracy is exposed and justice is properly served, I'm going to formally ask you to be my Luna. His voice was steady, certain. Not because you're my fated mate, though you are, but because in one impossible night you showed more courage, intelligence, and strength than most alphas show in a lifetime of comfortable living. He knelt deliberately, bringing himself below her eye level. The Alpha King, kneeling to an Omega. It should have been impossible, but here he was. I'm asking you to think about it seriously. No pressure, no expectations, no timeline. His voice was gentle but serious. After tomorrow, after Cain is dealt with, you'll be free. Truly free, for probably the first time in your life. Free to choose your own path without anyone controlling you. And when you've had time to figure out who you want to be, if you decide you want to be my Luna, he smiled with genuine warmth. I'll be waiting, however long it takes. Astrid couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly, couldn't process what she was hearing. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. Kings didn't kneel to Omegas, didn't offer choices freely, didn't wait patiently. I don't know how to be a Luna, she finally whispered, voicing her deepest fear. I don't know the protocols or politics or how to navigate court intrigue. Neither did the last 3 Lunas before they started, Theron said practically. They learned on the job, made mistakes, grew into their cults over time. It's a tud, his expression gentle and understanding. You saved my life, Astrid. Let me return the favor by giving you the one thing you've never had the freedom to choose your own path forward without coercion. He left before she could respond, left her sitting in the quiet room, holding a half-eaten bowl of soup, her entire world tilted on its axis permanently. The Alpha King wanted her as his Luna, wanted her to choose him freely. Astrid touched her chest, felt her heart racing with possibility, felt her wolf purring with satisfaction and certainty. Mate it, whispered contentedly. Home. But was that what she wanted, or just what the mate bond wanted? How could she separate her own desires from biological imperative? She had until after tomorrow to figure it out. Tomorrow. The council confrontation. The day Garrett Cain would finally face justice for all his crimes. Astrid finished her soup and tried to sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's death warrant in Garrett's handwriting. Saw Garrett's cold smile as he exiled her to certain death. Saw tomorrow and everything it would bring. Dawn came too quickly, as it always did, before important moments. The journey to Council Grove took 3 hours by secure convoy. Astrid rode in a reinforced vehicle with Dax and 2 guards, while Theron traveled separately with Commander Reeves and the prosecution team. Security protocol: if one vehicle was attacked or ambushed, the other could escape with critical personnel and evidence. Council Grove was neutral territory by ancient treaty, a natural amphitheater of ancient pine trees with a massive clearing at its center. 30 alphas would gather here, representing every major pack in the northern territories. It was the closest thing to democracy. The wolf world had major decisions required majority vote, and even the Alpha King couldn't override council consensus without extraordinary circumstances, which meant Cain had to be exposed here before witnesses who could not be intimidated or bribed by any single alpha. They arrived to find the grove already filling with alphas and their entourages. Luxury vehicles lined the access road, Warriors in formal pack regalia stood guard at strategic positions. The air hummed with power. So many dominant wolves in close proximity created a pressure that made Astrid's skin prickle uncomfortably. "Stay close," Dax murmured, keeping his body between her and the crowd. "Don't make eye contact with any alphas except His Majesty. And for the moon goddess's sake, don't let Cain see you until the right moment in the proceedings." Astrid pulled her hood up, making herself small and invisible. Old habits died hard, and right now they were useful. They were escorted to a secure tent on the grove's perimeter. Inside, Theron was being briefed by the prosecution team, a sharp-eyed female named Prosecutor Ashford, who'd built her career on impossible cases and impossible convictions. "The evidence is solid as bedrock," Ashford was saying, reviewing her notes. "But Cain will claim the ledger is forged, the vials are planted, the letters are fabricated. His entire defense will be attacking credibility and suggesting conspiracy against him. Then we make our witnesses unimpeachable," Theron said with certainty. He saw Astrid enter, and his expression softened fractionally. "How are you holding up?" "Terrified," Astrid admitted honestly. "Good. That means you're smart and understand the stakes." Ashford turned to her with assessing eyes. "You'll testify after we present the physical evidence. Keep your answers short and factual. Don't let Cain bait you into emotional responses. He'll try every manipulation tactic he knows." "I understand. Do you—" Ashford's eyes were kind but firm. "He's going to call you a liar publicly, a scorned Omega, making up stories for attention or revenge. He's going to try to humiliate you in front of 30 alphas and their witnesses. Can you handle that without breaking?" Astrid thought about the choosing ceremony, about kneeling on that floor, counting to 100 while 200 people watched her degradation. "I've been humiliated before," she said quietly but firmly, "but I've never had the truth on my side before. So yes, I can handle it." Ashford smiled with approval. "Good. Then let's go end this bastard's reign." The council assembled at noon precisely. 30 alphas sat in a semicircle of carved wooden chairs, with the Alpha King's throne at the highest point, providing clear sight lines to all participants. Theron took his seat, and the casual authority he projected made every other alpha look diminished by comparison. This was his domain, his council, his justice. Garrett Cain sat in the second row, looking confident and relaxed. He wore expensive clothes tailored perfectly, his silver hair styled impeccably. When Theron entered, Garrett stood and bowed with exaggerated respect that bordered on mockery. "Your Majesty, I'm relieved to see you well. There were disturbing rumors of trouble on the border." "Minor equipment failure during a training exercise," Theron said coolly, his face revealing nothing serious. Garrett's eyes flickered, searching for tells, for signs of suspicion, but Theron's expression revealed absolutely nothing beyond mild boredom. "I'm glad to hear it. The territories need their king healthy and strong." The formalities proceeded with bureaucratic slowness. Pack reports, territory disputes, resource allocation. Astrid watched from behind a screen in the observation area, her heart hammering hard enough to hurt. Garrett sat relaxed, confident, occasionally joking with neighboring alphas. He had no idea what was coming, no idea his world was about to end. After 2 hours of routine business, Theron stood. "There is one final matter, a serious matter that requires immediate council judgment." The grove went completely silent. Serious matters were rare. Council meetings were usually bureaucratic and boring. "I call Alpha Garrett Cain of Shadowpine Pack to stand for questioning." Garrett stood looking puzzled but unconcerned. "Of course, Your Majesty. How can I assist the council?" "You can start," Theron said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze blood, "by explaining why you attempted to assassinate the Alpha King." The grove exploded, alphas surging to their feet, shouting questions. Garrett's face went white, then red, then coldly calculating. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. Assassinate I would never. This is absurd." "Lieutenant Boone," Theron called. Boone stepped forward, still healing, but functional and dignified. 9 days ago, I was part of the Royal Guard patrol inspecting the northern border. We were ambushed by 20 Wraith Claws using military-grade FA poison arrows. Professional setup. They knew our route, our timing, everything. Wraith Claws could have gotten that information anywhere through their own intelligence. Garrett started. Captain Wyatt, Theron interrupted smoothly. Wyatt limped forward, the arrow wound still visible on his shoulder, bandaged but dramatic. The Wraithclaw's leader admitted directly that they'd been paid by a pack alpha. 50,000 silver total for the king's death. Preposterous. Garrett's voice rose with manufactured outrage. I've never dealt with Wraithclaws. This is clearly a frame job. Prosecutor Ashford, Theron said calmly. Ashford stepped forward, holding the leather ledger like a sacred text. This is your personal financial record, AlphaKing, recovered from your private safe in the Shadowpine Medical Bay. It details payments to WC mercenaries, Wraithclaw mercenaries, totaling 90,000 silver over 6 months. She held up the ledger where everyone could see. Garrett's handwriting was clearly visible, distinctive and damning. That's forged. Someone planted that in my safe. His confidence was cracking visibly. The handwriting has been authenticated by 3 independent experts. Ashford continued methodically. It matches your official pack documents perfectly with 97% certainty. She set down the ledger and picked up a vial delicately. This is for poison. Same type recovered from your safe. It matches chemically the poison used in the ambush. For poison that's illegal to possess under territorial law, let alone use as a weapon. Garrett's confidence was cracking like ice under pressure. Anyone could have put that in my safe, any enemy with access. Astrid Lowell, Theron called. Astrid stepped out from behind the screen, her heart hammering, but her steps steady. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Garrett stumbled backward, his face going absolutely bloodless. No, you're dead. The Wraithclaws, the blizzard. You couldn't have... The Wraithclaws, you paid 10,000 silver to kill me. Astrid said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Yes, I met them. They were very explicit about who hired them and how much they were paid. She walked to the center of the grove, into the space where everyone could see her clearly. See her blood-stained medical scrubs that she'd deliberately worn as evidence. See the bandages from Wraithclaw scratches. See the visual proof of everything she'd survived. I'm Astrid Lowell, Omega Healer, daughter of Chief Healer Sarah Grace. 9 days ago, AlphaKing exiled me in the Blood Moon Blizzard as a cover for my murder. He wanted me dead because I discovered he was using FA poison in his pack. The same poison he used to kill my mother 10 years ago. She pulled out the yellowed envelope with controlled movements. Her mother's death warrant. This is a letter from Garrett Kane to an unnamed assassin, dated 10 years ago. It orders my mother's death for knowing too much about FA poison shipments. It's in his handwriting, signed with his personal seal. She handed it to the council elder for verification. The old wolf examined it carefully, with reading glasses, then looked at Garrett with absolute contempt. The seal is genuine. The handwriting matches authenticated samples. This is unquestionably AlphaKing's letter. Garrett looked around the grove, wildly searching desperately for allies, but the Alphas were backing away from him physically. No one wanted to be associated with regicide and conspiracy. This is a setup, Garrett shouted, his voice breaking. That Omega is lying. She's a scorned, rejected wolf, making up stories for revenge. Then explain the FA poison in your safe, Theron said, his voice cutting through Garrett's panic like a blade. Explain the payments to Wraithclaws in your handwriting. Explain why my royal guards were ambushed with the same poison you possess. Explain your signed confession to murdering a pack healer. Garrett's mouth opened, closed. No words came out that could save him. He'd been so certain of his safety, so confident that with Astrid dead and the royal guard eliminated, no one would ever connect him to the conspiracy. Now he stood exposed before 30 Alphas, with evidence so overwhelming that even his political allies couldn't defend him without destroying themselves. I invoke trial by combat, Garrett suddenly shouted desperately. It's my right under pack law. I'm being accused, I can demand. You can demand nothing, Theron said, coldly, each word precisely cut. Trial by combat is for accusations lacking sufficient evidence. We have overwhelming evidence from multiple sources. The only question now is sentencing. He turned to the council. Alphas of the Northern Territories, you have heard the evidence. You have seen the proof. I ask for your judgment on Alpha Garrett Kane. One by one the Alphas stood. Each spoke a single word. Guilty. 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 30 voices, unanimous. No dissent. Garrett collapsed to his knees, all fight draining out of him. He looked at Astrid with something that might have been respect or might have been hatred or might have been both. How? He whispered hoarsely. How did you survive that blizzard? You told me I was worthless. Astrid said quietly, letting the words hang in the air. You were wrong about that. That's how I survived. Theron stood from his throne, descended to the grove floor with measured steps. Garrett Kane, you are found guilty of attempted regicide conspiracy with enemy factions, illegal possession of forbidden weapons, premeditated murder and high treason. The sentence is death to be carried out immediately by royal decree. 2 royal guards seized Garrett efficiently. He didn't resist, just stared at Astrid with that unreadable expression. Your mother, he said as they dragged him toward the execution site. She would have been met proud. You're just like her, too damn smart for your own good. Then he was gone, taken to face whatever justice the AlphaKing deemed appropriate for regicide. Astrid stood in the center of the grove, surrounded by 30 Alphas and their witnesses, and felt empty. No triumph, no satisfaction, just exhaustion and the hollow ache of grief finally acknowledged after 10 years of suppression. The session is concluded, Theron announced formally. The council will reconvene tomorrow for standard business. The Alphas dispersed slowly, whispers following Astrid the Omega, who'd exposed a traitor who'd survived the impossible, who stood before the council without fear or submission. Theron approached her as the crowd thinned. How do you feel? I don't know, Astrid admitted honestly. I thought I'd feel better, vindicated, but I just feel tired and hollow. That's justice, Theron said gently, his voice carrying understanding. It's necessary, it's right, but it doesn't fix what was broken. It just prevents future breaking. He held out his hand. Come on, let's go home. Home, such a strange word. Astrid had never really had a home before. But when she took Theron's hand, something in her chest settled. Her wolf sighed with contentment. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was a person, a choice, a future she was finally free to choose. Theron, she said quietly, that question you asked me, about being your Luna. You don't have to answer now. Yes. He stopped walking, stared at her. Yes, yes, I'll be your Luna. Astrid smiled, feeling it reach her eyes for the first time in days. Not because you're the AlphaKing, not even because we're fated mates though we are, but because you gave me a choice when no one else ever did, and I choose you. Theron's expression was wonder and joy and relief, and something deeper, something that looked like love beginning. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, not claiming, not possessing, just connecting. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us. Around them, the grove was empty now. Just an Omega and a king, standing in the fading afternoon light, beginning something new. Garrett Kane was executed at dawn the next day. Astrid didn't attend. She'd seen enough death in her medical career. Instead, she stood in the outpost's garden, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and thinking about futures instead of pasts. Theron joined her, wrapping up a blanket around her shoulders against the morning chill. Scarlett Vaughn has been sentenced to 5 years' service in the Royal Medical Corps, he said quietly. She'll learn what real work means and hopefully develop some humility. Good. Everyone deserves a chance to change. And Elder Margot is asking to see you. Apparently she has something of your mother's, something she's been keeping safe for a decade. Astrid's breath caught. What she wouldn't say over communications, but she's waiting in the medical bay. Astrid ran, literally ran through the outpost halls. Theron trailing behind her with an amused smile. Elder Margot sat in the medical bay, looking small and tired but alive. In her lap was a wooden box worn smooth with age and handling. "Child," Margot said, smiling through tears, "I'm so glad you survived. So proud of what you did." "Margot, what is this?" "Your mother gave it to me the night before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I should keep it safe for you. Keep it until you were ready." Margot held out the box with trembling hands. "I think you're ready now." Astrid took the box with shaking hands. Inside were her mother's journals, dozens of them, filled with medical notes, herb formulas, and detailed observations. But underneath the journals was a letter addressed to "My dearest Astrid" in her mother's flowing handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. "My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't stay to see the woman you'll become. But I need you to know you are not worthless. You are not weak. You are the strongest person I've ever known. And someday, everyone else will see it too. I've been investigating AlphaKing. He's been poisoning pack members who ask too many questions, building a private army, preparing for something terrible. I have evidence, but I won't live long enough to use it. That's okay, because I trust you'll find it. I trust you'll finish what I started. Be brave, my Astrid. Be kind. Be the healer I know you can be. And remember, true strength isn't about power. It's about choosing to help even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I love you. I'm proud of you. And wherever I am, I'll always be watching over you. Your mother, Sarah Grace." Astrid read it 3 times. Then she pressed the letter to her chest and cried. Not tears of sadness, though there was grief, but tears of release, of completion. Of a circle finally closed after 10 years. "She knew," Astrid whispered. "She knew I'd survive. She trusted me to finish her work." "She was right too," Theron said softly from the doorway, his voice gentle. "You finished what she started. You stopped Cain. You saved lives. You became exactly who she hoped you'd be." Astrid looked up at him through tears. "I'm ready now, to be your Luna, to build something new." "Then let's begin." 3 months later, the coronation ceremony was held in the royal capital. Every Alpha in the Northern Territories attended. The press called it unprecedented and Omega, becoming Luna not through political marriage, but through demonstrated merit and competence. Astrid wore a simple silver crown and a green dress that reminded her of Moonvine. She stood before the council, before her people, before history, and took her oath. "I swear to serve the packs with healing and wisdom. I swear to protect the vulnerable and challenge the powerful. I swear to be Luna not because of my rank, but because of my actions and choices." The coronation was broadcast across every pack. Young Omegas watched and saw possibility. Abusive Alphas watched and saw judgment coming. The entire wolf world shifted just slightly towards something better. After the ceremony, Astrid opened the first of 47 Royal Medical Academies across the kingdom. She taught personally at each one, sharing her mother's knowledge, freely refusing to let healing remain the province of the privileged few. She never forgot where she came from, never forgot the Omega who'd been called worthless, and she made damn sure no one else did either. On the anniversary of her exile, Astrid returned to the cave where she'd saved Theron's life. She brought Moonvine seedlings and planted them at the entrance, a living memorial to one impossible night when an Omega chose courage over surrender. Theron found her there at sunset, kneeling in the snow. "Regrets?" he asked. "None," Astrid said, taking his hand and standing. "I was exiled to die. Instead, I learned to live." She looked at the Moonvine already taking root in the frozen ground, strong enough to survive anything, beautiful enough to save lives, just like her. "Come on," Theron said gently. "Let's go home, Luna. Home, family, purpose, choice." Astrid had found them all in one impossible night, and she'd spend the rest of her life making sure others could find them too. The rejected Omega had become the most beloved Luna in history, not because a king chose her, but because she chose herself first. And that made all the difference.